All right, here's an update for you that I think you're going to appreciate. You may recall that a bunch of red states are trying to pass these laws to put the Ten Commandments in every public school or public school classroom. Just to remind you, like they did it in Louisiana. They passed a law in Louisiana to put up the Ten Commandments in every classroom. A federal judge struck that down last November. And in June, an appellate court upheld that decision. So that Louisiana law is not going into effect this month when school is back in session. That's great news. Arkansas then passed a bill to basically do the same thing. And then Texas passed a bill to do the exact same thing. And lawsuits have been filed in both of those states. And just to give you a reminder of what they did in Arkansas, their bill, Act 573, it requires all public buildings to put up a poster reading "In God We Trust," and it requires all public buildings and I think classrooms to put up the Ten Commandments. And they specifically said, this is what the Ten Commandments poster has to say. It has to be this large, etc. It's the King James Version. And their argument is that this isn't about shoving religion in schools. This is about American history, right? All of this is what the founding fathers would have wanted because the Declaration and the Constitution, it's all Christian. They're making all that up, but that is what their argument was when passing this. So I told you in Louisiana, they passed a similar law and it got struck down. The people who filed the lawsuit against the Louisiana law, it included Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the ACLU, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That was the same group that filed the lawsuit in Arkansas to strike that one down. And they argued in their lawsuit that permanently posting the Ten Commandments in every classroom and library, it unconstitutionally pressures students into religious observance, veneration, and adoption of the state's favored religious scripture. It also sends this harmful and religiously divisive message that if you don't subscribe to the Ten Commandments, you are not part of the right religion, right? That's basically what they said in their lawsuit. They also said in the lawsuit that there was a Supreme Court case about the Ten Commandments, like decades and decades ago. It's called Stone versus Graham. And basically, Kentucky passed a virtually identical law to put the Ten Commandments up in public spaces. And the Supreme Court said that is illegal. And they said the Supreme Court, today's Supreme Court, has not overturned that. So you don't even have to do any work, judges. It's the same law, therefore it's still illegal. They also said that in both the Stone Supreme Court case, this lawsuit that they filed in Arkansas, they said the Stone case and the Louisiana law, when they said you got to put up the Ten Commandments, both of those laws said they have to put up a disclaimer as well next to the poster, a context statement that basically says this is about the historical relevance of the Ten Commandments. Guess what? In Arkansas, they didn't even bother to say the Ten Commandments posters needed a disclaimer next to it. So if those other places, the Stone case, the Louisiana law, if those are illegal, well, then the Arkansas law is definitely illegal. And what they were saying is that by mandating the Ten Commandments in the classrooms, the state is effectively telling kids which religions count and which ones don't. And they are sending a message that kids from non-Christian families or the wrong kind of Christian families are second-class citizens. So that Arkansas law was set to go into effect on August 5th, like this week as we are making this. And a lot of the public schools in Arkansas open up like August 12th, next week, a week later. So really, they asked the court, hey, look, we know it takes a while for the courts to issue a ruling on this stuff, but school's starting up. So like, can you get on this quickly? And this week, a federal judge, his name is Timothy Brooks. He is an Obama appointee. He issued a preliminary injunction basically saying, look, I haven't weighed in on this. This isn't my final decision, but school's starting, so I got to say something right now. And for now, this law does not look good. And that's great news. But I want to show you some of the stuff he said here because it's kind of amazing what he said. Look at this decision from this judge. 45 years ago, he's talking about the Stone versus Graham case, the Supreme Court struck down a Ten Commandments law nearly identical to the one the Arkansas General Assembly passed earlier this year. That precedent remains binding on this court and renders Arkansas Act 573 plainly unconstitutional. Look at this. Why would Arkansas pass an obviously unconstitutional law? Most likely because the state is part of a coordinated strategy among several states to inject Christian religious doctrine into public school classrooms. Oh my God, it's like this guy reads my website. These states view the past decade of rulings by the Supreme Court on religious displays in public spaces as a signal that the court would be open to revisiting its precedent on religious displays in the public school context. Yeah, that's exactly what this is all about. And this judge gets it. And so what this judge says is, look, the Louisiana law has already been struck down, and the Texas law is already subject to another lawsuit. And the judge said, look, the Supreme Court could theoretically reverse all of these rulings. But he said, for now, and I want to show this right here. Where did it go? As for Act 573, the court's duty here is to explain in direct and simple terms why the law is unconstitutional under any legal test and award appropriate relief. This is ominous. He says the rest is beyond its control. And what he is saying there is the Supreme Court could easily say the Ten Commandments are a part of American history, so they're legal everywhere. Now, you could totally put them up in classrooms. But until they do that, we can just pretend the rule of law still exists. And under precedent and under previous cases, this Arkansas law is unconstitutional. So, yay, that is a remarkable ruling. And some of the things, I want to show you some of the things that this judge says, because he really does knock down every argument that the Arkansas lawmakers and lawyers were trying to say. Look at this. The school districts and the state tried to dismiss this complaint on the grounds that their claims of imminent injury are merely speculative or hypothetical. And what that means is the lawyers for the state were saying, these people, these families, they cannot sue over the Ten Commandments law because their kids haven't gone to school yet and they haven't seen any Ten Commandments posters. So you guys, come on, you can't sue us yet. You got to let us put up the posters, and then you could say you're offended and you could sue us, but you can't do it yet. But just like the last story I did, the table of contents is already out there. We know what the law says. We know what the Ten Commandments posters are going to look like. So this isn't hypothetical anymore. We know exactly what they're going to go up against. And that's what the judge said. The judge said Arkansas classrooms are going to have all the money they need to purchase these posters, and everyone knows what the posters will say since it was literally written in the bill. And it doesn't matter, the judge said, if there's additional stuff around the posters, because the commandments themselves are the problem here. Look at what this judge said. I want to show you this. Here we go. The displays will substantially burden the religious exercise by usurping their parental authority, blah, blah, blah. It'll forcibly subject their children to religious doctrine and beliefs. It'll send a message to their children that they do not belong in their own school community and religiously coerce their children by pressuring them to adopt this stuff. And I loved this one other thing I wanted to show you. Check this out. When you're reading these decisions, you know that these judges are like, I got to put all my legal arguments up here. But sometimes they save the best material for the footnotes. And if you look at this footnote, this is amazing. Because I don't know how many people read this footnote. The state offers no examples of mitigating context either. Like, what posters are you going to put around the Ten Commandments that's going to make any of this better? Perhaps the state imagines that in a math classroom, the surrounding context of equations would be mitigating, or in a French classroom, photographs of the Eiffel Tower and French greetings would be mitigating. Such speculation is pointless. Further, it is telling that the state's asserted secular purpose for displaying the Ten Commandments is to teach school children about the historical significance of the Ten Commandments to our nation's history, legal system, and education. Yet, the state has never mandated the display of any foundational secular documents of unquestionable importance to our nation's heritage, such as the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. Yeah, those historic documents don't need to be displayed. The only items Arkansas believes a child must see every day in school to convey a proper sense of the nation's rich history are a poster with the words "In God We Trust" and a poster of the Ten Commandments. Oh my God, I love this judge. He's calling out their bullshit. It is unbelievable. The other thing about this decision that I really enjoyed is that the judge said that the plaintiffs, the families, the church state separation groups, they had an expert witness, Dr. Stephen Green, who basically testified in front of the judge that the Ten Commandments have nothing to do with US history. Green said that the founding fathers supported church state separation, that the Constitution and Declaration of Independence were not based on the Ten Commandments, and that there is no long-standing historical practice of putting the Ten Commandments in public schools. And then to counter that, what did he say here? This is what the judge said about the state's response to all that. Look at the last two lines here. Suffice it to say that the only credible evidence of record in this case that explains the relevant historical practices was supplied by Dr. Green. Like, the state didn't even have a pretend doctor come up and say, I'm an expert in this stuff. And yeah, the founding fathers were totally into Jesus. They didn't even bother wasting anyone's time with that. So there was one expert in this case, and the one expert said everything Arkansas is doing is bullshit. Unbelievable. The judge also said it was intellectually dishonest to say that these were passive displays and kids could just ignore them. And check out this sarcasm in this ruling. The judge says, right at the top of your screen here, after all, the state surely expects that the commandments will actually be read by students. So don't tell me that they could just ignore it if they want to. Love that. So the bottom line is the plaintiffs have a strong case. The judge is openly saying all of this. Like, the judge is basically saying this is a good case. But, and this is the frustrating thing, if I go to the very end of this judge's ruling, after he says all of this, this is where it got annoying. And this is the only thing I didn't like about his ruling. This is the last page of his decision. He said, where did this go? Conclusion. It is ordered that this preliminary injunction is granted. So all these public spaces, public schools, public places, etc., he says, they cannot comply with Act 573 by displaying the Ten Commandments in public elementary and secondary schools. But look at this. He says that only applies in these 4 school districts: Fayetteville, Springdale, Bentonville, and I don't know how to pronounce the last one, Siloam. So this judge says everything this law says is unconstitutional. But for now, because this is an emergency motion that he's trying to file right away before school starts, he says, I'm only applying it to the districts where the students and their families who are suing attend. That's it. That's 4 school districts out of 237 in the state. Now, I will say a couple of those, Fayetteville, Bentonville, Springdale, those are some of the largest districts in Arkansas, so that's a plus. But it's only those 4 districts. Everyone else, when school starts up next week, for now, they have to put up posters of the Ten Commandments. And now we have to wait for the same judge to issue his final ruling that seems to be saying this law is unconstitutional, and that applies across the state, but he hasn't done that yet. I hope it comes soon, but the writing is on the wall. This judge is not buying what the state did. For what it's worth, the Arkansas Attorney General, his name is Tim Griffin, he said, I am reviewing the court's order and assessing our legal options. But the problem is the legal options are you could fight this, but it looks like none of the judges are buying any of this. Not at the district level, not at the appellate level, so it doesn't look like that's going to go anywhere. We'll see what happens. I mean, this is not just a setback for Arkansas Republicans. This is a devastating exposure of their sectarian religious agenda. I mean, if this case proves anything, it's that we need more parents willing to fight back against this. The ones who did represented those school districts. If we had more parents willing to put their name on a lawsuit like this, maybe it applies to other places as well. I mean, more people need to decide whether they want schools that educate their kids or churches that just masquerade as classrooms. But some good news for now. So, yay. I'll stop there and take questions before I move on. What do we got here? Maybe he does read your website. You say things good. There's no way he reads my website, but I do like the thought. And maybe, I mean, what I'm saying, I learn a lot of this stuff by reading these lawsuits and what the plaintiffs have argued, because they're making the actual legal case for why you can't have the 10 Commandments in the classroom. And I'm glad to see a judge actually take those arguments seriously and not just dismiss them like some right-wing judges would. I can tell them where they can put the 10 Commandments. They won't like it, though. That's a big thing to shove up there. But maybe one at a time? Sure, why not? Has there ever been a more insecure group of people than who? Conservative Christians? No. Republicans? No. I don't even know what we're talking about, but I can make a lot of guesses.